Hello, everyone. We're starting a new session of the Ask Me Anything session. Today, we have here with us Dr. Blair Schneider. I'm going to read a short abstract about her career. So, she's an associate researcher and science outreach manager for the Kansas Geological Survey. Her geophysics research focuses on the application of near-surface geophysics for archaeological and forensic targets, as well as environmental applications. Additionally, she is co-PI on the NSF-funded ADVANCEGeo program, which utilizes a multi-level approach to transform workplace climate. Dr. Schneider is a past president of the Association of Women Geoscientists and the 2019-2020 chair of the Women's Network Committee for the Society of Exploration Geophysicists. She has a Ph.D. and a master's degree in geophysics for the University of Kansas and completed a postdoc in STEM education at the University of Kansas Center for Teaching Excellence. So, an amazing career for somebody. So,
It's been nice being here. Thank you.
And I'm Isabella. I'm the co-chair of the SCG Women's Network Students Committee. So I would like to thank you very much, Blair, for joining us today and make yourself available to answer questions about your career and your life. And I'm going to start with a question that is also like an opening for you to talk a little bit more about yourself. So the first question, is related to how did you decide to become a geoscientist? And was it your choice or someone advised you in this? How that happened?
I feel like it was really luck that brought me into being geosciences. So I'll be completely honest, I wasn't the best student by any means in high school. I didn't have top GPA and stuff like that. And in school, I was just kind of doing what you were supposed to do. And my senior year, I think I got lucky because I took an AP environmental science course. And it was kind of the first class that I was like, oh, okay, so this is something that I could be passionate about. Like, I definitely care about the environment. And when I was looking at colleges, I got lucky there too. James Madison University, I loved their campus. Again, I wasn't the best student. I really liked the campus, the trees and stuff like that. So that's one of the main reasons why I applied there. And I applied to their geology department because it was the closest thing to environmental science. And I somehow got in and took my first geology class and fell in love. I remember so distinctly, I had one of the best professors, Dr. Sherwood, and he would get up there and just talk so passionately about geology and the earth. And he took us on our first field trip. We went out to a local farm and just like dug for quartz crystals. It was so cool. So from that day on, I was just hooked. Really just luck.
That's very nice. Like in my case, was kind of like this as well. Like I just decided, I think it's interesting. Let's go.
Yeah, and it was the same for geophysics. Really, we had to do research projects as a part of our undergraduate degree, and there was a professor there who we had some geophysics equipment that had been left behind by a retired faculty member. And so I just started going out with them and like collecting mag data at some like historical sites, and like, this is kind of cool. I like this. I ended up doing like 3 different research projects using MAG and GPR just because I was like, it's there and I have to, and I seem to like this. But I hadn't thought about it as a career until Dr. Courtier came in. In my senior year, we got a new geophysics faculty member, Dr. Anna Courtier, and I immediately signed up to do a research project with her, and we used radar to map abandoned cemetery in Port Republic, Virginia. And she was the first she was like the first woman I'd seen who was like, this is someone doing this work. This is someone doing geophysics. And she was the first one who was like, if you like this, you should go to grad school. You should apply and do these things. And I credit almost all of the start of my career to her because she like introduced it to me as a path even.
Yeah, thank you. I always find it interesting to know, like I said, like why did you choose geology, and also like why did you do this jump from geology to geophysics? I always find it interesting.
I think it came back to that liking the archaeology component. So I minored in historical archaeology because I always knew that I liked it. And the same professor I told you about, Dr. Sherwood, his like best friend was Dr. Geyer, who ran the historical archaeology department, and so he like got me hooked up into getting a position there and doing a research project with Dr. Geyer that used radar. So it was I'm really good at like networking. I will say that's like one of my strengths, right? I'm really good at talking and going up. I don't have fear going up to professors and being like, this is what I like to do. And so that definitely was a skill that I have that helped, is being able to say, I like this, how can I do this? And then they would just point me in the right direction.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you commented on or your experience on archaeology. So my next question will be related on with the projects that you work with, and like how it's like you said, you related geophysics with archaeology. How do you do that? And also after that, I'm gonna go on this part that you said about being good at networking, which is very very important, like for everybody. So first of all, uh, which projects and how do you do work with geophysics and archaeology?
Yeah, so when I started grad school here at the University of Kansas, again, it was all about networking. So I came here and I was working with Dr. Soflius and Dr. Rolf Mandel. And Dr. Mandel was good colleagues with Dr. Mark Leinott, who is the director at the Midwest Archaeological Center, which is a part of the National Park Service. And so he, through his networking, got me a research project set up with them and even a position. I worked there in the summers running geophysics surveys for them for, I think like, I have to go look at my CV, but I think it was like 7 years or something. And so I got to work at parks all across the Midwest, like from North Dakota, Knife River Indian Villages, down to here in Kansas at Nicodemus. And then my master's project was at Mound City in Ohio. And so it was 100% that networking that got me these really cool, interesting projects. And my dissertation project, I ended up focusing more on looking at how we can use radar to identify buried bone deposits, because they're a really important contribution and find, and particularly in prehistoric archaeology. And there just wasn't a lot of research that showed, can we even identify bone? What are the electrical properties of bone? Which naturally led me down this forensic avenue, as you can imagine. And so I never kind of came out of my PhD thinking I was going to be working with law enforcement, but that's just kind of something that's happened as a result of that. So you can really go a lot of different directions based on what you're doing.
That's really cool. Like this, like I said, this different options that you have when you go on geosciences. Let me just quickly open the door for my cat to go out.
No problem. I have a dog, so I totally get it.
Yeah, sorry about that. So next question is related to, like you said, the importance of networking. Is a very open question, but like, which tips can you give, like especially for I forgot like recent graduates, like the ones that are trying to start their career, how to do that, how to not feel afraid of approaching people.
Yeah, and I had to be completely honest and like acknowledge the fact that my upbringing really influenced my ability to network, and I realized it, as I've evolved over the last 10 years. I was an Air Force brat, so we moved every year or two when I was growing up, and every year or two I lost friends and had to go into a new school and make new friends. I was raised to like get into a room and just like introduce myself and make noise. So it's not difficult for me to like go up to people and be like, hi, I'm Blair. Like, I'm doing this research. Your research is so cool. Tell me more about it. And I know that definitely is like something that's a little bit more difficult. But yeah, that's kind of my tip, is if you're at an institution and there's a professor at your institution that's doing work that you think you would like to do, make a meeting to go talk about them. Hey, I'm really interested in pursuing some like environmental geophysics work. Are there societies that you recommend that I get in touch with? If I want to do further research or jobs, what advice do you have? The most beneficial networking I've had has been through professional societies. But don't just join, don't just become a member of a professional society. You have to actually then like become a member of a committee of a professional society. That's where you meet people. That's where the networking comes in. I think there's this kind of assumption of like, well, I'm an SEG member, so what does that mean? Okay, so I've met people though because I was on the committee of the Women's Network, and I'm on the committee of the Near Surface Technical Session. I'm interacting with board members, and so that's where it comes in. Is you have to do late work. You have to be doing some work to do that networking as well.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you commented on the societies, like the importance exactly of being like an active member of the society. So, uh, like you give a tip being on a committee, but for example, there are students that are on the student chapter. This already is very good for them, but do you recommend them to also search to be part of a committee and being able to network with people from all over the world?
If they can handle that load, absolutely. I mean, don't ever put too much work on yourself, especially as a student, because you're doing a lot. But oftentimes these committees within professional societies are actually seeking voices from the student and early career communities. They want representation on those committees, and you won't necessarily have to do that much work except to be there and provide some input and provide some voice and some feedback. So I would say 100% yes. I also think it's really important professional societies. When I first started as a student, KU had a lot of student chapters of like AAPG, SEG, SGE, I mean, just AWG, right? There were so many. And I feel like I kind of made the mistake of just like joining every society because I could as a student. And that was overwhelming. So it's good to like try out different societies to figure out like if it has your niche. But then narrow down, and it's okay to kind of selectively choose. Like, okay, I'm a member of SEG and AGU and GSA because those have my research niches. Excuse me, that's where I go if I want to talk about my research and professional development and stuff like that. But then I'm also members of like AWG, AEG that are more about like environment, right? Like you pick what's actually going to benefit you and the networks that support you and that you can give back to instead of just like being a member of all of the societies.
Yeah, I agree with your point. Like, it's true. It's very important to be selective and not like, because if you're a member of all societies, you're not gonna be an active member of most of them. So not a good idea.
Exactly.
So related to also like I said, networking is very important in to grow your career, but also which soft skills, for example, do you recommend to young professionals to develop?
So half of my position is outreach manager here, right? I cannot stress enough that science communication is so important, and not just like communicating your science to other scientists. That's actually not what I mean. I mean being able to talk about your science and science as a whole to the general public. This is just a gap. This is a gap, and it's a growing gap, I think, that we're seeing, that we aren't talking about like how science works, who scientists are, and what we're doing, and why there should be trust in science, because we focus so much on like just training our students how to give a presentation at a conference or how to present a poster. So we really need to learn to fill that gap. When you learn to talk with the general public, for example, you can't talk about science in the same way. You have to make sure that you're like bringing it down to different levels that people understand and using analogies that, you know, a place or culture or area would actually be able to recognize and know what you're talking about. I love place-based education and those kinds of topics because they really get you to focus on making those connections to that place, and so it's relevant to the people that you're talking to. And then one thing I recommend that I think everyone would hate doing, but I had to do, and it was super beneficial. When you want to talk about communicating science, record yourself giving a talk. Record it, and then sit down afterwards and sit down with someone and watch it. and just be like, wow, I was like running back and forth across the room constantly, and I was speaking so fast I can barely understand myself, and my arms are waving all over the place. That's really one of the best ways to learn like how to present. And I know people really hate it, but I really can't recommend it enough to just record yourself, get feedback from others who are in there, and then keep practicing that. They made us do that for the fellowship that I was on, and that was hands down one of the most beneficial training things that they did for me.
No, yeah, the first times that you have to record yourself and watch it, it's awful. I hate it. You nitpick every detail of a mistake that you do. But still related to this topic, I'd like to ask, like, besides recording yourself, do you think there are other ways that you can improve your presentation specifically for the general public? For example, there are opportunity inside the societies that give you this, or how to do it?
You can do it through societies. I think also just outreach to the public, identifying like, hey, there's a museum that's next to our campus, and so let's offer to do something for them on Earth Day, and let's put together an activity or something like that. If you can talk about what you do to an elementary school kid or a middle school kid, then you can talk about what you do to anyone. So if you learn to do that step of breaking that down, and there I'm gonna forget the person's name. It's like, I think it's if and then, or if, I can't remember, but it's like there's this little like structure that you use to describe your research in like 2 sentences. And when you learn to break it down to that level, then you really can start to learn to break it down to anyone. And think in advance. Okay, so I do radar. Most people have had an X-ray done before. They've gone to the dentist and they've gotten an X-ray done of their teeth, and they're familiar with that. So I can relate that. Okay, when I'm using a radar, it's kind of like I'm taking X-rays of the ground. So they can see that like you're taking pictures of the subsurface, even though that's not really how it works, but it's close and gives you that general representation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's always with practice, right, that you can get better. I find it. I remember that I recently saw I don't know if the people do that in other countries, but I saw people doing it in Australia. A person had to present their thesis in like 3 minutes, and you have to.
They do that here. It's actually a competition, a 3-minute thesis competition, and I think it's fantastic because you just have to get to the point, and it has to be. I mean, you have a whole wide variety audience who's judging this, right? So you have to make sure they understand what you're talking about. I love that competition.
It's really cool. I never seen this like before. I don't think we have this in Brazil. It would be nice to implement.
Yeah, they should do that for sure.
So I'd like to ask you. Of course, you're gonna have like your preferences, but for example, if you're giving tips for someone that is currently on undergraduation, they're getting into college recently, they are in geosciences, for example, but which areas would you recommend for a student that is a little bit lost still that they should study? Of course, that goes about like the passion of the student, about what they like, but which areas do you think they are most important for the future, for example?
Yeah, so I'm obviously biased, and I'm going to say, like, I see so much potential in near surface geophysics and how important it's going to become in the future, because in the future, we're right smack in the middle of dealing with climate change right now. And what's going to matter in the future is being able to identify natural resources like water and other things to keep us going forward. And so this, we're going to see a big shift, I think, from what our focus has been primarily in the past with exploration to more like natural hazard mitigation and natural resource exploration, like shallow natural resource exploration, excuse me. So that is an area that I recommend. Also, just, whatever your passion is, making sure that you're looking at it from a humanitarian perspective as well. And kind of being like, okay, if you're passionate about this in geophysics or geosciences, how are you going to use this skill or this tool to benefit others going forward? Because in the end, like that's the marketplace, and that's where your skill set becomes really valuable.
That's a great tip for everybody. We have a question from the chat,
Awesome.
and I'm gonna reinforce to everybody watching that you can send questions at any moment here on the chat. So Sarah sent a question. Hello, Dr. Schneider. It's lovely to see you. I have a question regarding professional experience. Is it better to focus and work in one company, or we should gain experience from different companies?
That is an excellent question. And you know, again, I want to acknowledge my privilege in being able to respond to that question. I got to work in a lot of different companies. So I spent several summers interning with the government, with the National Park Service. I had an internship with an oil and gas company one summer, and then I got to teach different classes and kind of more from the academic side. So I really got to dabble in all three of those, and that was so helpful for me to figure out what I wanted to do. It made me recognize that I never wanted to go industry. It made me recognize that I liked so many things about government, but I didn't want to do that full time. And I loved things about academia, but I didn't want to chase tenure track. And that was all from those different experiences that I was able to gather. And I was just as a student. So if you are able to try and get different internships or jobs to kind of gain those experiences, I really recommend it. I also recommend it because you might get into one position or one job and you just realize that that company isn't the right fit for you. There's the old standard of like starting at one place and staying there for 40 years. That doesn't fit anymore, right? There's too much that's changed over time. So recognizing that it's totally okay to leave a position and try a new job too. And I honestly encourage it because it'll help you broaden your network, gain new skills, and then continue to move up into like different avenues that you didn't know you could do or you could pursue.
Yeah, that's a very good question, a very good answer. Really, like you said, things changed. People don't stay very long in each company right now, right?
If you have the flexibility, though, if you are as a student, if you have the flexibility to say, okay, I'm going to apply for different internships this summer, apply and try and see if you can get an internship that's more in like the government or federal position and one that's industry and so you can see the differences, because there are real differences in those fields. You're doing geophysics, right? But everything is structured differently and the expectations are different. And what you gain from the experience will be different. So if you can, I want 100% say, don't just apply for an industry position or internship every summer. Look elsewhere. Look at nonprofits and apply for nonprofit internships or science communication internships, working with like a professional society. They can be so beneficial.
True, very true. Sarah has another very good question. Also, since all countries are shifting into sustainable geophysics and energy, would you like to address a piece of advice to start this area?
Yeah, one thing I wish that I had learned, I'm learning now. If we're going to be focusing on sustainable energy, and it's about who we're working with. So learning how to engage with different populations and different communities in a respectful and equitable and ethical manner. If there are courses or if there are resources or workshops that you can do that kind of address that, I think that will really give you a leg up, because it's great that this attention is turning, that this is the direction we're going and this is the research, this is the way research is headed. But we don't want to repeat the same mistakes that we've made in the past. And so trying to gain a little bit of awareness and education about how what we do in geosciences impacts different communities and environmental justice and stuff like that. I think that's really important, and it's kind of starting to become more popular or offered now.
That's a very interesting.
Environmental justice is actually that's a component. We just recently got a big DOE grant here looking at critical minerals and stuff like that. And you have to there's a whole section of it that's about environmental justice. You have to submit an entire report on like the environmental justice impacts of that. So these are the things that, you know, at least here in the U.S., the U.S. agencies are starting to require now.
That's a very interesting advice because I don't see a lot of people talking about it like this part. A lot of people talk about the hard skills related um, to I forgot the word for it. Yeah, this part is very, very important. I would like to ask related.
So I was gonna say, when you talk about hard skills, I can never recommend just like one class. Or I can't just be like, learn how to code, because that helped me like 5 years ago, but I don't need it now. I think with when it comes to the hard skills, it's just about learning how to do research. To me, that's the most important thing about a master's or a PhD is you learn the process. So you've learned how to do the background review. You've learned how to like design or set up an experiment or hypotheses and test it. And you've learned how to make interpretations while recognizing your limitations or where those research biases come in. That is the hard skill that I think we don't look at, is that critical thinking and the ability to apply that. You can always learn new things. You could start out in archaeogeophysics and then find yourself like doing a whole nother field because you've learned how to learn, essentially. So that's the hard skill. Don't forget that that is the hard skill that will get you anywhere.
That's just very good advice for sure. Yeah.
I feel like they always call it a soft skill, but I'm like, critical thinking is not a soft skill by any means. Like that is science. That is the core of all the hard skills that you're learning.
Yeah, that's also very important knowledge for life, right? For sure. The world's changing too fast, and we have to learn new stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So we cannot get stuck in like, oh, we need to learn this. Not necessarily. I would like to ask related to your leadership work, like how that helped you in your career. For example, like did your leadership work or did your voluntary work help to you in your career, or is it just related? This kind of
100% totally helped. So when you introduced me in my bio, I'm co-PI on an NSF-funded ADVANCE project, the ADVANCEGeo project. That would have never happened if I wasn't in leadership in AWG. So because I was president of Association for Women Geoscientists at the time, that's how I met Erica and Meredith and them who were with Earth Science Women's Network and Becca and Asmaret. Like that's how we got together with Billy Williams at AGU, and we're like, okay, something's happening and we need to address it. It was a meeting between those leadership boards that we got connected and we put in that grant. So I am so grateful to AWG in particular because leading that organization, one, was just like a really powerful professional development learning experience for me and a networking experience for me. But it led me down a whole new path of research that I didn't even know that I was capable of or that I would ever have access or opportunity to. So 100% yes, that leadership experience has been so powerful for my career.
That's very interesting. You were commenting or on your career, and that's also kind of a broad question, but how would you say that were the main changes that happened on your career? For example, were you going on a path and then uh, out of the sudden, like you decided to go to another one, and like you said, you had to learn new skills. That happened to you?
Yeah, it really did. And I did my master's degree because I really liked doing the research and I wanted to learn more about it. And then I was finishing up my master's degree and I'm like, I still don't know what I want to do. I mean, I'm not going to lie. And so that was part of the reason why I stayed for a PhD. I loved teaching and I loved the research and I just wanted to keep doing it. So I did. And then I was able to be like, I kept thinking like, okay, I'm definitely going to apply for like a government position. But going government, I couldn't teach. And I love teaching, but I don't want to do this whole, I'm sorry, I respect everyone who does tenure track and who can handle that lifestyle, but I so recognize that was not for me. I got really lucky when that postdoc came up. I had just had a baby And like going in the field and doing the geophysics work, I needed like a break, a little bit of a break from that for a year or two while I was recovering, and just getting to bond with my child. And so then this postdoc came up that was about STEM education and some other stuff I'd been dabbling in as a side job. And that changed my career right there, because now I was introduced to this whole new network, and that led me straight to this like KGS position of, yes, I get to do my research in geophysics, but I'm also doing the outreach and the education, and that gave me the background for it. So I feel like, 5 years ago, I could have said that the job I'm in now was a dream job. I knew by then that I wanted to be able to combine these two. I had no idea how it would happen. And it really just got lucky, and it happened because of my networks. So it's, yeah, I don't know. Too much of it, I feel like, is luck. And I know I shouldn't say that because I've worked hard and I've definitely like earned stuff, right? But it really was just like good timing too. Really, truly was. So I think I answered your question. I got a little distracted as I was talking. Yeah, my career's changed so much. And then the advanced geo stuff is like, it's social science, right? I'm doing social sciences now, which is awesome, but I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't done the postdoc in STEM education, because that's what that was. And so that gave me the background I needed to apply that towards this project. So yeah, it's your career is just going to change so dramatically, year to year. You can't predict it. You won't know what's going to happen. You just roll with it and try and set boundaries. I can't say that enough. Try and set boundaries. I set those boundaries to be like, I can't do field work for this amount of time, and it opened up a new door for me.
Very interesting. But like what you commented is true. Like you said, it is hard work. Of course, you have to but also it has a lot of luck, and it's important, like to everybody to recognize it. So I guess some people are like, no, it's just hard work.
It's
Things have
not.
to align for you.
They have to align, and I didn't have to face barriers that other individuals have had to face. And I recognize my privilege very much the further I get into my career.
We have a question on chat, but I wanted to ask a question before related to what you said to having privileges. But in your case, being a woman, did you at any point face any prejudice or have any difficulty on the field, or not necessarily?
Oh, I have. I definitely have. But I've only experienced certain things. Man, I mean, just being teased in the field, singled out, ridiculed in the field. I mean, teased for having to go to the bathroom. I mean, just my project with ADVANCEGeo is about harassment, and I've experienced sexual harassment in particular at every stage of my career, starting as a high school student to present day. It's just, gender harassment is a real thing, and it's almost ironic that I'm in this project that's working to combat it, but I'm still experiencing it every day. But that's somehow that hasn't kicked me out of science. I'm not gonna lie, there have been many times where I've just been like, why am I doing this? Like, is this really worth it anymore? I'm glad that I haven't quit, but it definitely takes its toll. I'm a hardened individual at this point, and I don't know. I know I know I have my flaws, and so it's definitely taken a toll. I've definitely experienced barriers, but I'm also grateful that I haven't had to experience the same barriers that a woman of a different race or ethnicity has had to experience, or an individual with different abilities has had to experience. I do have an invisible disability. I have irritable bowel disease, and so that's always affected my field life. And it's not something I've really been able to talk about. Although now I am broadcasting that all over the world. It's hard to go and do field work when you never know what's going to happen with your stomach, and you don't have bathrooms nearby, and so there have been barriers, and some that I've talked about and some that I haven't. So they exist. And as much as you can, persevere, but the number one thing has been my support networks. Support networks through AWG, through ESWN, close personal friends and family. And And the fact that I see such a culture change happening right now, all the early career scientists and mid-career scientists that I'm working with right now, they are talking about this and they recognize this and they're saying, okay, what can we do when we go in the field or when we go to a conference to make sure that everyone is safe and feels like they belong there? That it's like reignited my passion and everything that I'm doing now. And it's helping me. I have students now who are coming out in the field with me, and it's helping me be like, okay, now what do I do? How do I make sure that they're safe and they're protected? And so it's, it was hard, and I feel like I got pretty down there, but I've been completely reignited in the past couple of years, in spite of everything, because I see all of you all and what you're doing, and just it's amazing.
Yeah, it's really, really sad and really nerve-wracking to know that we, like in case of women, for example, we still go through this, and also, but it's good that it's being talked about and also related to safety in the field. It was a lot like, yeah, we go there, we do stuff, it's okay, but we have to be extra careful with lives in the field.
Yeah.
We have a question here on the chat from Ogochuku. I'm so sorry. I probably botched it.
No, you got it. You got it.
Ogochuku. I'm so sorry. My pronunciation is really bad. Hi, Dr. Schneider. What was like to transition after graduate school? What is work-life balance for you? How do you stand tall?
Oh, that is a really good question. Transitioning after graduate school is honestly a blur, because I had a kid. And so I honestly don't always remember that transition. That transition helped, or that transition was eased by that postdoc. The fact that my postdoc was a, at the office, staying at home, much more flexible work schedule made that transition so much easier. But at the same time, the last year of my graduate degree, I had Rachel in 2016. I didn't get my Ph.D. until 2017, right? So it was not easy by any means, but I had a super supportive advisor, Dr. Mandel, gave me an office space here so that I could pump in private and just like made sure I had the resources I needed to finish. But then in terms of work-life balance, boy, am I like strict about that now. I really am. I know that like there's going to be some weeks where I'm working more than 40 hours a week if I'm in the field or if I'm just finishing up a project, but I recognize that, and I really don't do work after I go home. When I go home, it's time with my family. It's time to decompress. When I'm on breaks, like this Thanksgiving break, I did zero work, and I read not one but two books that I've been wanting to read for a while now. I mean, I sat down for a whole day and just read a book in a whole day, and mentally that helps me mentally so much because I'm just burnt out sometimes, right? So it's so important that you figure out what your boundaries are. Some people can work more than that, or some people don't mind, like putting in a few hours and stuff like that over the weekend, and that works for them. But I've defined what works for me, and I'm strict to it. And again, so many people at my university and at the KGS who are in early career positions like me, they're the same way. And so we've brought in this expectation of like, this is how we work, and this is how we work best, and this is how we're most productive. And leadership sees that and respects that. So having that kind of body of support who is also amplifying that has been super helpful in this transition going forward.
That's very cool. But like sometimes, especially I don't know if in the beginning of the career, some professionals they don't have a lot of choice, right, related to putting, unfortunately, to putting boundaries. So I would like to ask you if you think there are areas that are easier in this sense. For example, do you think you work for the government, right?
I work for academia. It's a university.
Do you think working in academia give you more freedom to choose how you spend your time?
Yes. Yes. But, academia, I'm academia, but I'm staff, right? So like, I'm a scientist here, but I'm not faculty and stuff like that. I work on a 12-month calendar, and I'm supposed to put in 40 hours a week. I'm salaried. But when you go into like a government position, for example, they have different things set up there. So if you work overtime, you get comp time. And so it's actually like you worked 8 hours extra that week while you're in the field, you now get 8 hours of like basically paid, vacation leave that you can use. And they encourage vacation leave. And they'll even tell you like, hey, you maxed out after like accruing this much vacation. So you have to use it or you can't accrue more. They put in a lot of like, they're supportive of that, and they're supportive of people taking breaks and doing that. And then with industry's been changing. They've gone down to like the 4-day work week. So for some people, like I'm going to put in just like 10 hours over 4 days, and then I get a 3-day weekend, or like an extra half hour, and every other Friday I get off. So I think they're trying to see and recognize that's important. Also, just kind of figuring out what helps you what helps you calm down. What's your self-care? So for me, like exercise, I'm obsessed. And as long as I get up in the morning and go get in a good run or like a good lift session, I'm like motivated for the rest of the day. Or if I'm feeling really stressed and frustrated, I'll go exercise, and just like that's like calms down my anxiety so well. Snuggling with my puppy or my daughter is really good self-care. Meditation, waking up and spending the first 5 minutes in the morning and just meditating to like get yourself into that state of mind. Those are all like tips and tricks of like self-care that I use if I'm finding that it's a particularly stressful day or I'm having something to deal with. So, but again, it's personal preference. Those are just mine, but whatever works.
Sure, yes, that's very important to have like time for yourself and the things that make you feel happier. But I like to ask you if you think like at least I think in your case would be more related to the United States. But do you think that for example, young professionals, they are starting their careers and for example, oh, they want to go to the industry and they start working and they feel like they're under way too much pressure. Do you think that currently the market's good for people to maybe, if they feel they're being too pressured in a job, to go for another one? That would be a good one. I don't know.
That's a hard question, and I can only speak from a U.S. perspective on that one. And the reason that's so hard to answer right now is because of the pandemic. I don't understand what's going on right now, except that there's a multitude of things happening. I mean, we have open positions that we can't get filled here. And we don't entirely understand why. And so I think a lot of it came from recognition that, after the pandemic, things have to change. Hybrid and remote work is absolutely an option and should be an option for people. People aren't getting paid enough. We have zero childcare support, at least, here where I am. And so we're kind of at a big reckoning right now. So there are positions open. I see opportunities to transition right now. But it's very specific to the timing that we're in right now. I can't give a good answer because it's just all up in the air right now.
No, yeah, I understand that it's hard to answer. Like I asked really, especially because of that, because I've been reading about it too. That people they want more from their employees, their career, and they should.
Yeah,
that's
exactly, as they should. So it's hard. I agree with everything. I agree with the reason why people are saying like we deserve more. So it's hard. I also think we maybe don't do a good job at like selling ourselves and advertising ourselves, right? Like Kansas Geological Survey, like why would I want to come to Kansas? Why would I want to work here? And it's like we need to do a better job of kind of describing who we are and what our goals and our values are and making that transparent to the public so that if they come to apply for our position, they can see that. I love it here. I came from DC. I'm an Air Force brat. I never thought I was going to stay in Kansas. Let me just say that. But Lawrence is now my home. I really, truly enjoy Lawrence, Kansas, and I'm very happy at the idea of like my daughter being able to be raised here. It feels like a safe and welcoming community for me, and so we have to be able to like kind of advertise that and also recognize that if we bring people in here, what steps are we taking to like make them feel included and that they belong and are supporting them, because everyone has different needs or different experiences. The workforce really has to reckon with that.
True, that's very true. I don't know exactly how like Kansas is like.
Kansas is in the middle. It's like smack dab in the middle of the U.S. It's primarily agriculture and farming, and it's an absolutely beautiful state. And it's hard. I came from Virginia, where there's Appalachian Mountains, and there's just terrain and there's topography, and then you go right out to the beach. Right, there's water everywhere. Kansas is a lot different than that. It's flat. It's flat agriculture, but in the middle you've got the Flint Hills. We were under the Cretaceous Interior Seaway, and so the rocks and the fossils are phenomenal. There's so much beauty here, but in the Midwest, there's stereotypes and there's reputations, and so people don't always see it that way. But we have the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets in this state that I've ever seen.
Oh, that's very nice. Indeed, like maybe with a better propaganda, people go.
Yeah, we do. We need better marketing.
Yeah. No, but I'm pretty sure it's a beautiful place. Like there's a lot of beautiful places in the U.S. Never went to, but I see like pictures and videos kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So for now, we don't have more questions on the chat. So I'm gonna start like finishing the session. If anybody has a question, feel free to ask on the chat. But I would like to ask you, like, if you want to give more tips for, especially like students or recent graduates, or even people that are in the middle of their careers, like you said, for example, you said related to marketing the job, but also like it's important to know how to market yourself, right, as an employee. So related to that, related to networking or other soft skills, which what other advices would you give for people who are watching this?
I think when I talk about networking, I want to make a point about social media, and like strictly defining how you're going to use social media. So for me, like Facebook, for example, is not a place where I necessarily go. That's not like my science account, right? Like that's more for like my family. I like my Instagram. Like those are specifically like I'm keeping up with my family. I'm sharing pictures. It's, I don't just accept any friend requests on there. Whereas like LinkedIn and Twitter is more of my science persona. So like be reflective when using social media for networking, because it can be phenomenal for networking, but making sure like you kind of draw that line if you feel you want to or need to between like your professional versus your personal. That's been really beneficial for me because I find the professional social media just absolutely exhausting and overwhelming. I can go into a room and talk to anyone for hours, but social media is what I find exhausting, so exhausting, but it's a powerful network tool. And I think if I had to recommend anything else, it's from the get-go, identify your support network. SEG Women's Network, Earth Science Women's Network, AWG, like identify that support network, because there's so much useful advice and friendships and collaborations that come from those, but only if you join in and put yourself out there, right? You can't just stand back and watch. You got to engage in the conversation, which can be super scary, but the people in there are just wonderful. So jump in and get engaged and be a part of the conversation. And don't be scared to just like cold email someone and be like, hey, I'm really interested in pursuing this field. I see that, you have a phenomenal career in this. Do you have any advice on exactly what you're asking me here. What kind of classes should I take to prepare for this? What kind of companies should I be looking at for jobs? You may not get a response. You might have to like send another email, but then most likely you will get a response, and they're going to be happy to respond and give you some feedback. They really are.
True. Like, yeah, especially like you said, social media, Twitter. Recently, I decided like, okay, I'm gonna create an academic Twitter that's like just for following people in the academia, and I see, yeah, a lot of posts related to what people are doing. Uh, uh, how do I say it? Like scholarships for masters and PhD. So first, I think like people, like you said, coding mail is really great. And also if people are like, oh, I feel like it's too formal, going for Twitter is also very good. Like
Yes.
you can engage in a conversation that's already happening. So it's not that weird kind of not approaching. The approaching is easier, right?
It's easier, but also just, man, you got to have a little bit of a thick skin if you're going to do stuff on social media, because that's part of the reason why I find it so overwhelming. I can't understand the comments, or kind of like, the hatred that just comes out on there. So, I feel like when we talk about this whole concept of being extroverted or introverted, I feel like when it comes to social media, that's where I feel very introverted, and and it's part of my job here, right, that I have to run the social media, and it's exhausting to me. So you really, practice that self-care when you're doing that stuff.
No, yeah, for sure. Twitter is complicated in this side. But do you think like even in like just kind of academic side also have this hatred or it's lighter?
Oh yeah, it's everywhere.
Mm.
It's everywhere. But one thing I really appreciate about Twitter is that, man, it's getting the information out there. I feel like the Whisper Network isn't the Whisper Network anymore. And avenues like social media, Twitter, Facebook, this is where we've kind of, blown up these issues to say this is happening. These are real experiences. These are real problems, and we need to address it. Before, when everything, was just going through peer review publications, we weren't getting anywhere that way, obviously, right? And there's a lot of issues in those systems as well. So social media has really given a voice to people who haven't had a voice before, and I very much appreciate it for that.
That's true. It has the goods and the bads, right?
Exactly.
So we don't have more questions for now. So I'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Blair, for being with us today and answering all these questions and talking about your experiences and your opinions. And I'd also like to thank everybody who watched us and who sent questions. And thank you very much and have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you
Bye
so
bye
much,
for now.
everyone.
If you want to say something to finish.
Just thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Sorry it took so long to get me wrangled on the calendar.
Oh, no, no problem. It's okay. So yeah, I don't know if we'll have another session. So for now, nice holidays. If we do, we'll see each other.
Yes, exactly. Nice holidays, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.